A Woman's Reaction to No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert A. Glover. So we're going to do things a little bit different this video. We're going to do chapter 5, but we're going to get through it rather quickly, and then we're going to go on to chapter 6. I have not been feeling very strong on the last couple of videos I've made. It's not my forte. The last two videos, chapter 3 and chapter 4, and now we're going into chapter 5, they've all been on kind of self-help stuff. And that's not something I'm very strong on. I'm much more interested in human sexuality and how human sexuality kind of threads through the entire framework of human behavior. Because much of what human beings do is related to sex and sexuality, way more than we realize on the surface. And it's fascinating because there's this element of taboo to human sexuality, and we tend to forget that it's threaded through everything we're doing. And so, you can look at it and say, oh, that's really taboo. And then you forget that it's covering pretty much the entire span of your day. It's surrounding everything you do. It's not, it's not as taboo as you'd think it is because it's so mundane and it's so layered over everything you do, which is fascinating. And I think if people have a better, clearer understanding of how their sexuality works, it's going to benefit them. They're going to make healthier choices in their lives. They're going to understand the otherwise inexplicable behavior of other people around them. It's good to have an understanding of your own sexuality and of human sexuality in general. That's not what these last few chapters have been about. These last few chapters have been self-help. And I am not good with self-help at all. It is not something I'm good with. And, I could maybe say that that's regrettable. I don't know. It's just not an area of strength of mine. And so I've been reading through the last two videos. I did them, but I didn't feel so confident about them. And I'm looking at chapter 5, and I don't feel particularly confident about that. And so I'm going to get through chapter 5 as fast as I can and go to chapter 6, where I think I might actually have something meaningful to add to the conversation. And hopefully I will have something meaningful to add to the conversation. They were good chapters. They were clearly well written. They had a lot of really excellent advice in them. Not my strong suit, guys. I'm really sorry. And, hopefully going on from here, I'll be able to make better videos of, hopefully a higher quality for you. Anyway, chapter 5. Contrary to what many nice guys believe, they don't have to become more like women in order to have their feelings. This is why I support men in learning about their feelings from other men. That's really good advice. That's actually a really good idea. Men and women handle feelings and emotions differently. They react to feelings and emotions differently. One of the best examples that I know is the idea that, and I think they did a study on this, but it's been a long time since I've heard about it, but men in the workplace versus women in the workplace and how people respond to stress. When men get stressed, they get angry. And so men in the workplace, they tend to get a little bit angrier when they're working, but they can kind of use that to fuel them onward. Women, when they're stressed, they break down and cry. And I know this because I hate it, but it's true. If I get too stressed out, I just break down and cry. And then my husband's looking at me kind of like, why? And I've got, tears running down my eyes and I'm blubbering away. And it's like, I can't help it. It's just happening. That's how women handle emotions. That's how I handled a lot of emotions, where it's like I react to things in ways that I don't always find particularly helpful, but they tend to be quite feminine. Men react to things differently. They react to emotions differently. There's the TV version of how men react to emotions, and there's the pop culture way of how men react to emotions. And then there's how actual, honest-to-God men handle emotions. And it's good to be around men and see men in life going through a variety of different circumstances and behaving as men, in their natural environments, and to get a better idea of how to be a man. And a very big part of being a man is having emotions and also handling those emotions in a masculine and controlled kind of manner. And when I say controlled, I don't mean not feeling and not having emotions or not being able to express emotions at all, because this is something I guess a lot of nice guys, as Dr. Glover defines them, a lot of nice guys struggle with. And, you know, you can have emotions. It's good to have emotions. It's good to understand what your emotions are and where they're coming from. But you also need to understand how to react to them in a way that's not going to be destructive or unhealthy. And so this is something you're going to learn better from other men. Women really can't teach it to you. Women can't provide you with a good behavioral template, because women, we're off doing our own little thing, you know. We're in our own world. And so this is something best learned from other men. All the nice guy paradigm does is create wimpy men who allow bullies to kick sand in their face or shame them for loading the dishwasher wrong. Yeah, being a nice guy will not make you strong. Being a nice guy in the Robert Glover definition of the term will not make you strong. And women want men who are strong. People want men to be strong. I know the current cultural environment doesn't necessarily encourage strength in men, which I think is a problem, a huge problem. But being nice, just bending over and letting people run your life, it's not healthy and it's not strong. And the thing people want in men is strength. Strength of spirit, not necessarily physical strength. And so these 3 chapters, which I have skimmed over and very poorly talked about, they're a great beginning for changing your mindset, changing how you approach the world, and being more masculine, being more strong, and being more in charge of yourself. And so, as much as it's not something I'm good at talking about, I think it is something that should be talked about. I'm glad that this book is out here. I think that you guys should definitely read this book. It's a great book. And again, I apologize that I just haven't been able to talk about it nearly as well as I think it deserves. Men born after World War II had the misfortune of growing up during the only era of recent Western history in which it was not always a good thing to be male. This was primarily the result of 2 significant family and social changes in the post-war era. Boys were disconnected from their fathers and other healthy male role models, and boys were forced to seek approval from women and accept a female definition of what it meant to be male, which kind of draws us back to the whole learning how to handle emotions from male role models instead of females. There are very, very few healthy male role models out there in the world for men growing up these days. I feel very, very fortunate because, you know, my son, he has his father, of course. He has uncles. He has his grandfather. Both of his grandfathers, actually, but one of them lives far away. And, you know, these are men in his life that he's going to grow up around, that he's going to interact with, and hopefully that's going to give him not just one, but multiple male role models in his life that he can kind of learn from and learn how to be masculine from. And I think that's a very good and very healthy thing. And that's kind of one of the big things this chapter is about. Being masculine, and also being masculine in a communal sense, where you learn masculinity from other men, but you also teach masculinity to other men by being masculine yourself. Men need to have places that they can go to bond and to be men. And I understand that I'm kind of infringing on that by being female and making videos about the red pill and kind of infringing onto the men's club of the red pill community. But at the same time, I think it would perhaps be somewhat helpful to have at least a few women out there in the world who are, you know, not necessarily in the in crowd, but making videos talking about some of these ideas and either confirming or denying some of the concepts that are going around in the red pill community, because it cannot hurt to have women looking at it and saying, oh yeah, hypergamy is totally a thing and we do it. It might not be quite as demonic as you guys think it is, but it's definitely there. Another common trait among nice guys is the belief that they are different from other men. This distorted thinking usually began in childhood when they try to be different from their bad or unavailable father. In adulthood, nice guys often create a similar dynamic with men in general. So yeah, I heard that a lot in strip clubs, and I kind of just learned to, like, I just ignored it. It was kind of like, oh, you're not like other guys. You and the last like 10 guys who've all told me that you're not like other guys, you're all just different individual unique snowflakes or something. I'm still looking for what I'm looking for, so I'm just gonna keep looking for that. I didn't realize it was part of the nice guy behavioral pattern, but it makes a lot of sense. And the problem with that is you don't realize how much like other men you are, and how much that is not necessarily a bad thing. And one of the ways of fixing that, of course, is, as he talks about quite a bit in this chapter, going out and hanging out with other men and realizing that yes, you are like other guys, and also other guys not as bad as you think they are. Ironically, these same men frequently complain that women seem to be attracted to jerks rather than nice guys like them. Many women have shared with me that due to the absence of any discernible life energy in nice guys, there is little to be attracted to. And we're back to the wonderful nice guy versus jerk dynamic. Are you attracted to nice guys or are you attracted to bad boys? If I had $1 for every single time a guy asked me that in a strip club, I'd probably have about as many dollars as I got in a strip club. I was never attracted to either. I personally, and I knew a lot of girls who were attracted to bad boys. So many of the girls I talked to, oh, bad boys this, bad boys that. I thought bad boys were too much trouble and hassle, and they were obnoxious and they were immature. I didn't like them either. But nice guys, of course, they tend to be the ones people look at last. It's like, if you're too nice, if you're too agreeable, if you're not... And too agreeable, just to be clear, there are some guys who are really, really agreeable out there in the world. Do you have fire in your spirit? That's what we're looking for. I don't know a better way to describe it, because that's what I was always looking for. I wanted a man who had real fire in his spirit. And I found one. So I know they exist. But you want that. That's what women are after. We want somebody who has a sense of strength and a sense of vitality. And he doesn't have to be a jerk. Like, jerks can come off as being strong because they're acting super aggressive and super masculine, and so women look at it and say, well, he's not weak. Because if you don't have any kind of fire in your spirit, you're weak. You can be an incredibly agreeable person, you can be a real team player, you can be really friendly, you can be really amiable, but if you don't have any kind of fire in your spirit, then you're just weak. And women aren't attracted to weakness. But the idea that we're attracted to jerks is just, or bad boys, I think a lot of girls fall for bad boys because they don't know how to look for something better. And if you don't recognize, if you've never seen like a really good man, an alpha, for lack of a better term, like a really strong, healthy, functional male, it's very easy to look at a bad boy and be like, well, yeah, sure, that's great. I never went for them. I thought they were trouble, and not in the fun way, just inconvenient trouble, and immature, and also just mentally weak as well. Maybe that's just me. I found them to be very mentally weak-minded individuals, and that did not impress me. But yeah, a lot of nice guys will complain about the other men are jerks idea. I'm nice, I'm good, I'm virtuous, and the behaviors that I've exhibited are also virtuous, and that way I can see myself and perceive myself as being a good and idealistic image of myself, while failing to realize that all the other men around me who are just behaving in a masculine manner, they're not necessarily jerks, they're just masculine, and I fail to be masculine. And instead of recognizing that failure on my own part, I'm the good guy, and they're all the bad guys. And it's not a healthy way of looking at the world. Each parent plays a significant role in facilitating this healthy transition. First, the mother must know how to give enough to meet the child's needs without creating dependency. She must also know how to get her own needs met so she is not tempted to use her son to fill the void. Second, the father must be present and have a healthy bond with his son. This connection helps the little boy move from the cozy lap of his mother to the challenging world of men. I've seen a few people who've commented complaining that I've been making these videos criticizing men and blaming men for all their own problems and telling men that any problems they have are their own fault and they just need to change. If you have problems that originate in you, then you need to change them because that's where the problem originates. And also, it's really great because you have control over yourself. You don't necessarily have control over the external stuff that's happening in the world, but you do have control over yourself. As depressing as it is that you need to change something about yourself in order to improve your circumstances, it's great news because you have the capacity to change the thing that's causing your problems, as unpleasant as that might be. You also have the responsibility to change the thing that's causing your problems, which not a lot of people want to hear. But this part, this section right here, this quote, it really highlights the fact that not everybody who's making mistakes here is the guy in question. Not everybody who's made a mistake is the man. This highlights the fact that women make mistakes, and those mistakes need to be identified and given a certain degree of attention. Women who can't be good mothers, they cripple their children. They fail their children fundamentally. Women who, fail to meet their child's needs without creating dependency. Women who don't know how to get their own needs met, and so they use their sons to fill the void. They create unhealthy children who grow up to be disadvantaged in life. The other part, of course, is that the father needs to be present, and this is something that's really, really important. I was a dancer. I worked around a lot of single moms because, and I know you guys would probably look at it and say, well, of course, slutty women, they get pregnant and then they're single mothers, and then of course they turn into strippers. What happens a lot of the time is girls experiment with sex when they're like teenagers, and then they have like mishaps because they're experimenting with sex as teenagers, and they get pregnant, and then they're teenage moms, and then it's like, well, I've screwed up my life a lot. I could still go to college, but I'd never see my kid, and I need to earn a lot of money in order to support myself and my kid. And I actually want to spend time with my kid because my kid is very important to me. And I'm still relatively hot because I'm 18 and I just graduated from high school. The answer to that is usually, not usually, but very often, if you can make it work, a strip club is like the perfect answer to that. And I know so many women who ended up at strip clubs because of that. So I worked with a lot of single moms, and they get angry when they hear that a father or a positive male role model needs to be in a child's life, because they don't want to hear that. They get super defensive about it, like almost universally super defensive about it. I'm a good parent. I'm good enough. I'm not a bad mom, And I mean, what are you gonna say when you got pregnant at the age of? I knew one woman who had a baby at the age of 14. What are you gonna do when you have a child at the age of 14, and you're all on your own, and your parents weren't particularly supportive, and so you don't have a support network for you and your child, and you're just trying to make it work, and you're working your ass off, and then people come along and they call you a bad mother because you happen to be existing at the moment. What else can you do? But I think they're making a huge and very fundamental mistake. They look at the statistics that say that single motherhood is not good for children, which it's not good for children, and they say, I'm a good parent. I don't know why people are criticizing me. And what they should be saying is, okay, what can I do to negate the horrible things that these statistics indicate? What can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen to my child, that my child doesn't become one of these statistical situations? Because not all children fall into that statistic. Not all children of single mothers end up having a lot of these problems, but many of them do. So what's the difference? What can I do to mitigate that? And having positive male role models is something that's just deeply, deeply important. If you don't have a father in the picture, and actually, I can give you a personal example of that. My husband, his father died when he was 3 or 4ish, I think, 4, maybe 6ish. I can never quite get the age right. Nobody's ever really told me. When he was very, very small, his father died, and he spent a lot of time growing up with his grandmother and his grandfather. And his grandfather and his grandmother, both huge role models in his life. And one of the very cool things was when I got to meet his mother and of course his father, his stepfather, and they're awesome people. In fact, one of my kids is staying over at their house tonight just so that he can get away from his annoying big sisters, and he's having a party. It's wonderful. But it was very cool also to meet my husband's grandparents, who had played such a significant role in his upbringing. And I remember meeting his grandfather, and his grandfather's since passed away, but I was very honored to be able to meet him. I really respected those two people. I mean, his grandmother's still around too. She gets to be involved in her great grandkid's life, which is really cool and very sweet. It was so beneficial. Like, it was just unbelievably beneficial for my husband to have those two people in his life. And I'm so grateful to them for being so involved in his life, because I think that's a significant part of why he is the man that he became. And it's really, really cool. Sometimes people die. I knew a family where the mom died. People pass away, sometimes young, and that's not something that people prepare for in this world these days. It's kind of shocking and unexpected. Like, whenever you see a single mom, the last thing you're thinking is, oh, she's a widow, because that never happens, right? Except when it does. And just because something like that happens, it's not the end of the world. You have to have positive male role models, though, to kind of counteract the lack of positive male role model and father. You've got to do that to whatever extent that you can. Grandfathers, uncles, somebody. And that's a tricky thing too, because there can be problems with stepfathers sometimes, and a lot of people have talked about the problems that sometimes arise with step-parents. But you need positive male role models. I knew one guy whose parents had divorced. He said he introduced me actually to his wrestling coach, and he had a tremendous amount of respect for his wrestling coach. Like, he was traveling back home, and I traveled with him because he was going to a state that I had wanted to visit. And we ended up meeting his wrestling coach, and he was telling me about how much respect he had for that man, because that was one of the few male role models that he had in his life, and it meant a great deal to him, which is why he came and visited the guy. Like, he traveled across the country to visit this, to visit a lot of family, but this guy was one of the guys he visited while he's visiting, family. So it's uncle, aunt, cousin, sister, relative, and then his wrestling coach. Like, this guy was a huge influence on this life. Healthy male role models are huge, and greatly underestimated in this current society. Huge influence on a child's life. Very, very important. Fathers need to take their sons hunting and fishing, work in cars with them, take them to work, coach their teams, take them to ball games, work out with them, take them on business trips, and let them tag along with them when they go out with the guys. All of these activities help boys move successfully into the male world. This is also really true. He talks here about how he, as he puts it, as a recovering nice guy, he gets a lot of benefit just seeing young men behaving in a less modified manner where they haven't been influenced by women quite as much, and they tend to be much more natural in their behavior and their interactions. He talks about how that's very healthy for him because he gets to see it and he gets to kind of understand it better, how to be masculine. But he also gets to kind of teach them how to handle their masculinity a little bit more because, as an adult, he knows, just because you feel a certain way or have a certain issue doesn't mean you should handle it in a bad way. Men benefit from interacting with other men. And this is particularly true as you grow up and you sort of build a template in your head of how you should behave. And I think that's an important thing here. Like the behavioral templates you get from your parents or from the role models that you had in your life as you were growing up, they affect you a great deal. That's a huge theme in this entire book, actually, where a lot of nice guys had very negative templates for men, and they also had strong feminine influence from their mothers and their school teachers and all the women in their lives telling them how to act and how to behave. They grew up with, a very weak idea of how to be masculine and a very overbearing idea of what feminine, what women want. And so taking the antidote to that in many cases is taking time to be with other men and interact with other men and be masculine and be in a masculine environment. I think this is incredibly valuable. I think it's incredibly important, and I'm really happy you wrote this in here. Recovering nice guys can show their daughters what a real man looks like. Girls benefit by seeing their fathers set boundaries, ask for what they want in clear and direct ways, work hard, create, produce, have male friends, and make their own needs a priority. As with little boys, girls can learn what it means to be male, both by watching their fathers and by interacting with them. This modeling will have a positive influence on their future choice of partners. This is also very, very true. And again, this is another one of the many ways that fatherhood is an underestimated and very important part of our society. My dad was a very involved father, and I remember he would read books to us. My dad was a little bit eccentric. My parents were both a little bit eccentric, and they were extremely literate. And so my dad he loved to talk to us about philosophy, philosophical ideas. He liked to talk to us about logic, the study of logic. And he also liked to ask us, he loved the Socratic methods, and so he was constantly asking us questions just to get us to think. And I really, really want to do that with my kids, and I wish I was better at doing that, because as they grow up, I really want to expose them to that, especially the Socratic method, and just asking them questions to get them to think and encouraging thought, and encouraging the kind of thought that makes you ask questions, like deep questions. That was what we grew up with. It was really cool. And then also he had a lot of books. My dad is quite the bibliophile, and so tons of books. He would read us stories all the time, and that's one of the things that I remember that was a very positive thing in my childhood. I struggled a lot. I struggled a lot in school. I had a lot of very bad things happen to me inside of school and in the context of school, and so I have a lot of very negative memories of my childhood. There were a lot of things that were not good that happened to me. But I do have positive memories of my childhood, and one of the things that's just this very bright positive memory for me is all the times that we would sit down in the living room and Dad would pull out a book and he'd be reading this book to us, and we'd be, gathered along on the floor and sitting down and just looking up at him, and he'd be reading these books to us. Little girls, when they grow up, they're like, I want to marry someone just like Dad. You do get to that point where you grow up, and you don't necessarily want to marry your father because that's creepy and weird, but you do want to marry someone who operates at that level. It's like, this is what a man is. This is the template that's been kind of laid out for me as I've developed, and you see that in a very negative way with girls who have, drunken assholes for fathers who are no-shows half the time, and, really, really bad parents. And then they end up, growing up and having this, all these problems with promiscuity and dating bad boys who cause lots of problems in their lives. And it's like, people are perfectly happy to blame the father when that happens, but what they don't realize is that if you're present and if you're a good father and you're very involved in your children's lives, don't be surprised if your daughters grow up and marry somebody who, on some level or another reminds them of you. And my mom actually talked about this when I was a little girl. She told me about this, how you know, her father was a very present, very caring father, and she grew up and she married a guy who reminded her in, you know, in a lot of fundamental ways. So I'm not talking about like he had the same job or he looked the same, but who had a lot of similar personality traits. You know, little things, little details, you know, little things. In my husband's case, his philosophical manner, his ability to sit down and think about the world, and you know, and just kind of think on a bigger level than just the immediate, you know, I'm gonna have a beer and sit down and watch the football game kind of guy. But my mom married someone who, you know, reminded her of her father in a lot of ways, in his strength of character. And it's really funny because my dad and my grandpa weren't exactly the same kind of guy at all. You know, my father is, you know, he's a clinical psychologist, and my grandfather was a military man who fought in World War II. So they're, you know, complete opposites in a lot of ways. But, you know, the template that my grandfather had, you know, demonstrated to my mom when she'd met my dad, it was kind of like, okay, this is my template. And again, you had that same pattern with me, you know, very, very involved father, very loving father who's, you know, demonstrates a bunch of traits that I found to be valuable that I then sought out in another man who I've now reproduced with, and now we're going to be passing those traits along to our kids, and our kids are going to be watching, you know, their dad and learning those traits from him that he's demonstrating to them. And I see that also in me and my mom. Like, I learned a bunch of traits from my mom that I'm demonstrating now that I'm an adult and a mother, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, and some of them I wish I didn't have because they're inconvenient, and some of them I look at and it's like, yeah, this is going to serve the kids well. You know, they're going to grow up and this is going to be good for them. You know, parents teach their kids a lot, and it's very valuable what parents teach their kids. And it's not just mothers. We have this society that just completely like celebrates single motherhood like it's a virtue, and we fail to realize that fathers are a huge influence in their children's lives. You know, you want to be there and you want to be present for your offspring, at least the offspring that you care about, which is where the monogamy thing comes in. You know, you don't necessarily, like, if you're doing the spray and pray kind of method of reproduction where you're getting a bunch of girls pregnant and just hoping that some of them produce viable offspring, it's like, well, you'll have lots and lots of offspring and some of them will succeed. If you want to have high quality offspring, and women are definitely looking for a man who's going to produce high quality offspring with them, you want to be there, you want to be present, you want to be monogamous, and you want to be a good father, which is not necessarily the easiest thing in our society, in our societal climate, where, you know, divorce is, you know, I would say all but encouraged in women, where it's like, well, you're not happy, dump him and move out, and you can get the checks from the government and everything's going to be okay for you, and yeah, he's screwed, but, you know, your feelings are what's important, ladies. That's not good. Anyway, that was chapter 5 and chapter 6. Chapter 7 is going to be Getting the Love You Want, Success Strategies for Intimate Relationships. That sounds like it's right up my alley. I can't wait to read about it, and I will talk to you guys next week.